lot of kids around now, a lot younger than me, that are getting into the idea of more mind manifesting music in order to take the, you know, pure definition of psychedelia being mind manifesting. Yeah, there's a nice resurgence coming along, which I find quite heartening. I actually feel that if you play to an audience and you take them on a journey somewhere that's outside where they were when they got to the venue, then what you've done is something psychedelic. You've manifested their mind with a whole pile of sounds that makes them adventure inside their own heads.
Well, I think the Sydney psychedelic scene's been going now for a couple of years or so. But what's happening right now in psychedelic music, I think, in Sydney is a lot of people from different bands are joining together and forming new bands, which is really interesting. I could name a few. There's a band called Phonographics who have just started playing, who are a combination of two members from Broadcast and Transmitter, and one of the guys is also in Dead China Doll, and the other guy's also in the Laurels, and the drum's also in Dakota Ring. So they're forming a new band at the moment who I've seen play once so far, and they're just fantastic. So I think what's great about the Sydney scene right now is a lot of people are interacting and starting to form new bands, and I think some really amazing music is going to come out of it in the next couple of years or so.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's always been a bit of a weird one, psychedelic music, because I don't think it really falls into a category. So
I see it as a sub-genre. It's all going back to rock.
Genre of rock, yeah, really. So it's all rock and roll, but I think it's more about like having those, you know, long extended bits and different sounds and all that stuff. A lot of use of reverb and delay that seems to be effects and stuff like that. You know, it's good for like earheads or whatever. But going back to what you're saying about Sydney psychedelic music, it's been a bit fragmented. Like, we tend to play with anyone who'll have us. It'll be like acoustic artists, you know, metal bands, punk bands, and I think that there's kind of becoming enough bands now that you can sort of have a bit of a scene, and there are some we play with really cool bands all the time, you know, so it's definitely like an opportunity for everyone to band together.
I honestly would say it's stronger than ever, and this is from someone who started playing in bands in the mid-late 90s. It did go through a bit of a lull, but in the last few years I've seen that all the individual little scenes that used to exist are now pulling together and stitching together, and I think that's really, really important. I'm seeing much less cliques. I'm seeing a lot of people collaborating, a lot of bands collaborating, playing together, a lot of great venues supporting that, and a lot of people out there in the community supporting that as well. So I think it's really strong. It's great.
The music that we're creating, again, is, I find it difficult to put psychedelia in a box, because psychedelia to me is, as far as music is concerned, is any sound that manifests your whole mind, that creates pictures and colours and ideas, that inspires thought, that makes you feel like you've left something and you feel like you could create something brand new from what you've just heard, or you feel like you've just been on an adventure, just all entirely cerebrally.
We played at like the Annandale, played at the Record Crate, which is a cool little record slash bar, so like record store slash bar restaurant,
bar and grill kind of place.
Yeah, and that's cool because the owner there, he's really into, you know, rock and roll. Played at the Spectrum. Played even some venues down in South Coast, because that's where we all met, was down there. So
Rad down in Wollongong.
Yeah, Rad in Wollongong. Used to be yours and ours. So
same kind of vibe as the Record Crate in Glebe. You may not get the best sound, but you get all is so much better.
People go to that venue to see bands.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of places, like you kind of have to, you get your friends coming in and you get people that actually really dig your band, but it's good when you can go and play a venue where you can actually turn people on. That's what I think, is good about, doing things like the Psych Sundays and all that sort of stuff. There's so many bands that you all kind of become friends, and really, at the end of the day with psychedelic music, it tends to be your fans are people who play in.
So I want to talk about a night called The Velvet Cave, which is put on by a fantastic group of people again, which is held at Club 77, just up the street from where we are now. And that's a monthly night that runs, again, really well curated, independent, great bands, people playing, people with the right attitude, putting on those nights, and a fella called Sean and the people that work with Sean. So I think The Velvet Cave is a great movement. We have a group called Octopus Pie, run by Kim, who again put on a lot of these warehouse type nights in Marrickville and around the tracks, really important. But in terms of venues in Sydney at the moment, I think we're spoilt for choice. And in terms of bands, I think we're spoilt for choice. Bands in Sydney can have nothing to complain about at the moment. People that want to get out and see live music in Sydney can have nothing to complain about. We just spoke earlier about there being 3 or 4 gigs within 300 metres of where we are now. And so I think it's really wonderful. But I'd say the Octopus Pie people, the Velvet Cave, these are people doing some regular nights that are really good.
The Marrickville warehouse scene is kind of really well suited to it. There's a collective at the moment called the Red Collective who are doing some kind of psychedelic shows, and that's where I base most of my Octopus Pie shows, as well as in the Marrickville warehouse scene. And that's because they're big open spaces that you can transform in any way you want, so you can get lots of psychedelic visuals and things like that in there, which I deal with a lot. And also they allow you to be free. They're kind of underground. They're not quite legal, but they allow everyone to be free and not feel like they're being watched by bouncers, which is kind of what you wanted to give. You want a sense of freedom, which goes sort of with psychedelic music and things like that.
The whole kit and caboodle as far as Sydney goes. Everything around the inner city, from the Annandale to the Hopetown, Rest Her Beautiful Soul, to the Sandringham, who's recently resurrected as the Newtown Social Club. Triangle's played all over the damn place. Our spiritual home was always the Lansdowne. We were offered by a guy named Mitch Lanham, who was in a band called Kilohertz at the time, which was kind of a metal band, to do a monthly show, and we put together Triangle's Sideshow Alley, and that was a mainstay for us for about 3 or 4 years, where we did a show once a month and just had the craziest, weirdest acts we could find, and Triangle would, either second last or headline each show, and with our own brand of, psychedelic madness, I suppose.
I've been long attending the Austin Psych Fest in Austin, Texas every year, which was a small festival when it started, and it's probably grown really quickly from a really good ethos, really good people running it and curating it. And we wanted to do a similar thing in Sydney, and we decided to start it very much based on the model that they started their festival. So that is showcasing local artists, independent artists in local independent spaces.
Sydney Psych Fest, we decided to do it because of Austin Psych Fest was getting really big and the psych music in Sydney was kind of going off. And so Dave from Dead Radio approached me about collaborating on that together. So we decided to do the first Sydney Psych Fest. I think there were some other people that wanted to get that off the ground as well, but they were probably going to take a bit more time. We decided to just start small for the first year and see how it went. We sold out of tickets, it went really well, the bands were fantastic. So hopefully we're going to grow it from there in the next few years. Bigger venues, bigger artists, and it was a good day.
So after attending a few Austin Psych Fests and speaking with a few good people there, we decided just to do one in Sydney. We had, from memory, about 15 Sydney bands who were really keen to be on board. We had bands from Adelaide, from Melbourne, Brisbane, and we were able to bring one band over from Japan. 2 of these Australian bands we found being Right Into the Sun from Adelaide and Dreamtime from Brisbane we saw playing in Austin Psychfest at first, and we collaborated with those guys, a lot of people around town. The venue was 107 Projects at Redfern for our kickoff party, and the Petersham Bowls Club, Petersham, for the main event. And the reason we chose those two were because they're very good grassroots community independent organisations. The 107 Projects is a community-run space with really good people. Chris Hancock, who's one of the managers there, produces a lot of bands here. And the Petersham Bowls Club, again, it's a really endeared local venue, no poker machines, local ales on tap, beer at pub prices, and they did a really good deal for us. We're very big supporters of live music, so that's the reason we ended up going to those venues. And the bands that we did are all bands that play together now. Or someone once said to me, it doesn't have to sound the same to feel the same, and I think that's really kind of what we went for. Psych is a broad genre, so yeah, we just brought together a bunch of the bands we could on a tight budget. Yeah.
Bands that we've played with, we've always found ourselves, because we've never been able to specifically put ourselves into any genre, and I've always referred to Triangle for at least the last 5 years as the plodding tortoises of psychedelic rock in Sydney. So some of the bands we've played with have been of a very odd ilk. Bands like Ricketetus, Slimy Things. There was a group called Pseudopop, which was Ricketetus, Slimy Things, The Captain's Package, and Darth Vegas. All very proggy bands.
What I call the psychedelic music that I like, which is more current, because I listen to lots of old psychedelic music, but the psychedelic stuff that I listen to that's current are bands, and the bands that I've liked the most in the last couple of years are Dead China Doll and Making. I think they're the two best bands in Sydney. They might say that their music isn't psychedelic though. It's kind of, I think, open to interpretation, but I find their music to be psychedelic. Yeah, so Dead China Doll and Making, definitely check them out. But there are so many bands that I could name. I know Broadcasting Transmitter, Dead Radio, also fantastic. East River, and they've gone on to form Wildcat Falling, really good as well. Nomia, who are just kind of reforming at the moment. So this is kind of more in the noise, psychedelic, kind of darker vein, some of the things. And then some of them are the more kind of lighter guitar, garage rock sort of psychedelic stuff as well. So it's really varied, but everyone kind of works together. It's a really close scene, and there's a lot of overlap.
Some of the more punky, I guess they were kind of punk bands. They were definitely anarchists. There was a group that's called Young Romantics Make Love, put together by a dear friend of mine who unfortunately passed away last year, Sean South, and that was always an extremely improvised set of lunacy and wildness, and that was what I saw psychedelic was, as more than a scene. I think the growth of psychedelic music has been watching people create sound to take people on the journey, and it never necessarily came together as a scene so much, but as a collective of different bands who all wished to have a very strong psychological effect on their audience. There was also like far more avant-garde, noisy kind of stuff that was put together during that similar period of time, kind of late first decade 2000s. There were a bunch of people which kind of really started with the Jewel Plover record label, and was then brought on by places like Dirty Sherlo's, the Warehouse venue, which is now also unfortunately shut down.
I mean, we played with the band
Kaleidoscope.
Yeah, Kaleidoscope.
From there, from South Coast, they're great.
Yeah, we played with them a couple of times.
Grungy psychedelic stuff.
Yeah. So that's cool, and I think we definitely fit in with that because we have a lot of big fun tones and riffs and stuff. There's a band called Polygods, which are also from further down the coast, and we played with them at the Valpark here, and a few other places all over the place. They're kind of psychedelically with skater. Because I think the thing with Sydney as well, it's not just Sydney, it's the surrounding areas, but everyone comes to play here.
Yeah.
So that's the cool thing. I mean, like you can't kind of have, I suppose, turn enough people on and get it all happening if you're just playing in Newcastle or Wollongong.
I would say 2SER and FBI are both really wonderful supporters of the Sydney Psych scene. I'll talk about 2SER because you asked about it, and a couple of programs. There's the Band Next Door, which supports local Sydney bands, as the Bridge on FBI does, which is another wonderful program. But if we're going to talk about 2SER, be remiss not to talk about Mark Ward and the Sideways Through Sound program, and his contribution, and that program's contribution to, again, stitching the Sydney scene together, giving a platform for independent bands to be played on radio, to have events put on that bands like this can be promoted and played through. His contribution can't be overstated. I think it's really, really wonderful, and a testament to what community radio does in this country.
I got started in music because I was playing in bands from the age of 14, so what I'm in at the moment is a band with a few friends, and it's psychedelic rock. It's kind of more throwback psychedelic stuff. It kind of sounds a little bit like Pink Floyd or something like that, but
Nice.
yeah, lots of fun.
A bunch of us used to play in a band together, and once that had its time, we rejoined and started just writing some new songs. And it wasn't until the week, I think we'd been doing that for about 6 months before we booked the show. On the night of the show, I think they needed a name to put on the poster. We were listening to Roland Howard at the time, and the name Dead Radio jumped out at us, and that kind of stuck. So we've been a group for about 2 years now. We've put an EP out, and we're just finishing a record, which will be our first LP to put out now. Yeah.
Got the second Sydney Psych Fest, which we're going to start working on shortly. Dave's already gotten started on that, and I've taken a bit of a break from my Octopus Pie shows, but they're going to start up again soon. I organised a festival in 2012 called Wormwood Stock, which might be happening again whenever I can find the time to do it. Yeah, there's plenty happening. Lots of exciting bands coming at the moment.
Look, one of the things I think about music in general, as far as the way in which people are playing it now, is that there is a lot of open-mindedness with the way people perform their songs.
You know, I think the Sydney Psych scene is going to be really important to music in Sydney in the future, and I think it's going to be a time period that we look back on, so it's good to have this kind of documentation of the people and the bands that are involved. I think it'll be important one day down the line to see where Sydney music came from and how it evolved.
If I were to say anything to a musician, is like, do your scales, learn your technique, and then once you've gotten really good, break every single rule that you can find and make something weird and different and interesting and beautiful. Because the truly great bands that we've ever known, from the Creams to the Zeppelins to Hendrix to, I don't know, apparently there are still bands now that make music. But the thing that separates those bands from everybody else is that they expressed what they were doing freely. They tipped their hats to the people that inspired them, you know, and it's very clear that Clapton listened to a lot of Robert Johnson, that Clapton listened to a lot of Muddy Waters, but it didn't sound like Muddy Waters when he played it. It sounded like Eric fucking Clapton. It sounded like, you know, and Ginger Baker and Jack Bruce, the same deal. Like, you could hear where their influences lay, but what they actually created was something incredible, and it was the sum of the parts of the band members not trying to sound like something in particular, not trying to sound more metal, or trying to sound more funk, or trying to sound more blues rock, or anything like that. It was a matter of finding the people and allowing their colours individually to show through the music that they created, and I think that that's something that psychedelic music really brings out is an individual performer's personality within an ensemble, and seeing those different personalities and listening to them. And you can hear a person's personality by the way that they play an instrument many, many times. And I hope that that's what we do with Triangle, because yeah, she's a hell of a monster. And, you know, I have no expectations of success. I think that one lives a much happier musical existence when you don't have expectations of success. The success comes from playing a show, whether it be 5 people or 5,000 people, and knowing that you've affected them in some way or another. And yeah, my addition to the psychedelic world is really Triangle, and I'm very proud of it.